Hey everyone, welcome back from spring break and welcome to your online percussion classroom with Zach. I am your Community Works percussion instructor, and today we're going to get into the idea of the beat. Let's get started. Today we are going to dive back into some of the concepts that we covered in the last lesson, and in particular we're going to dive deeper into this idea of a beat. We are going to then use that understanding to help us read and play our very first accent pattern. That's right. To begin with, I would like to give us a definition of what the beat is. So, a beat is an idea or feeling that happens when we listen to a collection of accented and unaccented notes. Now, you may remember that last time we talked about the accented and unaccented notes inside of the two different time signatures that we looked at. The time signature 4/4 and the time signature 3/4. I talked to you about the accented beats 1 and 3 in our 4/4 time signature, and the accented beat 1 in our 3/4 time signature. Pardon the floppy paper. Now, the reason that it is important to remember those accents is so that when we start hearing music, hearing collections of rhythms that do not have accents on those beats, we are able to maintain our position in the measure and in the continuation of the music. So, let me give you an example of how different accent patterns inside the same rhythm can change the feeling of the music. So what I'm going to do is clap a very popular rhythm called the rumba clave. For all you rhythm nerds out there, it's a rumba clave and it's 2/3 position. And I'm going to count quarter notes, like we saw last time. A quarter note in 4/4 designates the downbeats when written like this. I'm going to count quarter notes, and the first time through, I'm going to put a stress on the first and third beat of this. It's going to be a 2-measure loop. Right? So you remember, a measure is the space between 2 bar lines. 1 measure. I'm going to have a rhythm that takes 2 full measures of music to complete. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to clap a rhythm against that, this rumba clave, so that you can hear what it feels like. So you can hear the accents on beats 1 and 3 and feel what that accent grouping feels like. And then I'm going to put a stress on beats 2 and 4 for the third and fourth time that I clap the rumba clave, so you can feel what that is like. All right, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, did you feel how then the third and fourth time that I clap that whole pattern, I put a stress on the beats 2 and 4? It changed the way that rhythm felt. The accents are so important because they allow the musicians to shape the beats, to shape this feeling that's happening. The range of accents from soft to loud is called dynamics. The dynamics of a musical piece are its range from soft to loud. So that is why accents are so important. One of the many reasons accents are so important. They create the nuance of the music. They give a dynamic range to the music. If somebody is talking to you and they are always talking at a very high volume, they're always yelling at you, it has one particular kind of feeling. Same with music. If the music is always accented, always loud, it's going to have one particular kind of feeling. That can be very good, it can be okay, or it can not be exactly what you want. So that's why it's so important to be clear and expressive with how we use our accents. They give a dynamic range to the music. So I know, I have said that a beat can be two different things. I have said it can be a distinct unit of time, and I have also said it can be a feeling or an idea that happens when we listen to accented and unaccented notes. That's pretty confusing. So let me clarify what I mean. A beat is the feeling that happens when we listen to accented and unaccented notes as they travel past us in the musical time that's happening. A note value is a distinct unit of time. That is more accurate. The note values tell us how long a particular note lasts, and the notes are related to each other as such. Here is a diagram to help us see how notes are related. Whoops. I have written out 4 different types of notes. You may remember that I talked about the anatomy of the notes in our last lesson. I said that notes have a note head, that circle right there, and a stem that rises up from the right side of the note head or comes down from the left side. I said that was true for all but two kinds of notes, and that's true. There is another piece of note anatomy that I will get to in this explanation. First, I would like to show you the four different kinds of notes. They are a whole note, which is just a circle, a half note, which is the circle with the stem, the quarter note, which is the drawn in circle with the stem, and the eighth note. Oops, can you see that? I'll use this finger. The eighth note, which is the drawn in circle, and then our new piece of note anatomy is called a flag. There are notes with different amounts of flags on them. The eighth note has one flag. We will talk more about flags in a moment. The notes have different values, like the numbers 1, the fraction a half, 1/2 of a whole, the fraction a quarter of a whole, or a half of a half, or an eighth of a whole, a half's half, half. A whole note has two half notes inside of it. A half note then has two quarter notes inside of it, which means if there's two quarter notes to a half note and two half notes to a whole note, there are 4 quarter notes in a whole note. Or another way of saying that is 1 quarter note is a quarter of a whole note, a fourth. The same goes for eighth notes. There are 2 eighth notes for every quarter note. There are 4 eighth notes for every half note. And there are 8 eighth notes for every whole note. That's why they're called eighth notes, because they're an eighth of the whole. So last week, when I asked you how many eighth notes would complete a measure of 3/4, I was hoping that you would say 6 would, because there are 2 eighth notes for every quarter note. That process of dividing a note, a distinct unit of time, is called subdivision. Now, why is subdivision important when we are talking about accents? Let me tell you. Subdivision is important because it gives a musician a wider range of possibilities of where to place their accents, and thus a wider range of possibilities to create an emotional experience with the music. If you remember last week when we were talking about downbeats, we're saying a downbeat is any beat that happens on the click of my fingers. What I'm doing right now is conducting in 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Downbeats are any beat that happens down, like any beat that happens on the click of my fingers. If that were the only place we could have an accent, only kind of note we could have, it would not be very emotionally expressive. And so, by breaking that up in half, pardon me as I grab my example, as such, into eighth notes, we now have twice as many possibilities of where to put our accents. Ta, di, 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 ta, di. Right? Again, I am using the Kadai vocalization, ta and di, as you can see here. Let me hold it a little closer so you can see it, ta and di, as the names for my eighth notes. Here is that same rhythm written out with some more information. Remember when I said we would talk about flags? Well, let's start there. So you can see, excuse me, the same rhythm, this rhythm, written two different ways. I'll step back so you can also see my eyeballs. In the first example, I have beamed the eighth notes into their beats. 2 eighth notes is equal to 1 quarter note. A quarter note in 4/4 time is responsible for designating the beat. I have taken the flags from each one of these eighth notes and connected them, which is called beaming them. You can see that each collection of 2 eighth notes has 1 beam. That is one way that you can write out eighth notes. Another way to write eighth notes is to beam them into collections of 4 like this. That's another common way you might see that, just so you're prepared for all of your music reading adventures. Another thing I have done is to write out the names of the beats. First beat, second beat, third beat, fourth beat. So you can see that the downbeat, the eighth note occurring on the beat, the eighth note named ta, happens on beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. The second eighth note is sometimes called the offbeat, the and so on. I went through some of those names in the last video. I'm calling it D, and that happens in between the beats, exactly in the middle. I, at the bottom, have written out R's and L's. So, the reason I've written out R's and L's, let me place this down so I can show you, is if you were at a drum set and you had an accent pattern in front of you, at the bottom of the accent pattern would be written out a collection of R's and L's. Those are called sticking patterns, and they tell a drummer which hand to use. So, since not everyone has a drum set, what I'm hoping you will do is practice your accent patterns on your chest, on your legs, anywhere that is appropriate, because as you'll find as we go through these accent patterns, you can practice them anywhere, which is an amazing part about rhythm. So the R's and L's tell us which hands to use. I'll bet you can figure out what R stands for. If you're saying right, you are so correct, so right. If you're saying L stands for left, you're miles ahead of me. My goodness, look at you go. So the way we would play that rhythm, I'll hold it up one more time. With the proper sticking, it's just to go right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and or ta, di, ta, D, ta, D, ta, D. Just like that. Here is our first accents pattern. You will notice that I have replaced the names of the beats. Beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 are no longer written up here. And instead, you see this symbol, the less than sign. In math world, in music world, this means an accented note. This note is accented. This note's accented, etc. So what we're going to do is, for this, from now on, when we practice our accents, it's really important that we are creating smooth and even notes, that our durations of time are consistent. That allows other musicians to link up with what it is that we're playing ultimately. Because ultimately, we're using these accent patterns to get us to a place where we're going to be playing music. That's the goal. Play music. So, in order to make sure that we're evenly dividing our notes, it's important to have a metronome. I have one on my phone. I don't know if you can see that with the glare. It's called Pro Metronome. I got it on the App Store. You can go to Google and type in metronome, and you can find all sorts of different kinds of metronomes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my metronome, and I'm going to conduct in 4 along with the metronome, so you can see what beat we're on. You could also go like this. I'm going to conduct. And I'm going to say this accent pattern. And then I'm going to say it through twice. I'm going to leave the metronome on, and then I'm going to play it on my chest so that you can hear what it sounds like when you're just practicing it that way. So, can you hear that? That's the metronome. That's our tempo. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to speak this rhythm for you. It goes like this. Ta, D, 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 ta, D. That's what that rhythm sounds like. And here's that same rhythm played with the appropriate sticking. You remember that I have, I'm going to pause that for a sec, written out what sticking goes with this accent pattern. You can see it down here. You'll see that the right hand gets the first accent, the left hand does not, the right hand does not, the left hand does, and the right hand does, the left hand does not, the right hand does not, the left hand does, the right hand does. And as you repeat that, you'll start to find that pattern. So there's our tempo. The pattern goes ta, D, 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 ta, D. So, pausing the metronome. That's the accent pattern through twice, playing it on our chests. Do you remember our repeat sign? Of course. Repeat means start it over, play the whole thing again. That's why I did it twice, because it has a repeat sign. So, that's our very first accent pattern, with all the appropriate markings, all the appropriate information is now available for you to use. And we will continue to see more accent patterns in our weeks coming up, and we will see how by placing accents at different points in our subdivisions, in our beats, we can continue to create an infinite variety of feelings just with rhythm. All right? There you go. Set forth and practice as you will. If you would like, you can go back and pause the video when I'm holding up that accent pattern. Here, I'll do it. Pause here, copy that down, and then you can have it to practice. All right, enjoy your week. I'll see you next time. This has been Percussion with Zach for Community Works. Take care.